This week's devotional is Divine Mystery, Fully God and Fully Man, October 28th, 2024. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John 1:14. A life without passion is not living. It's merely existing. This quote has been attributed to Leo Buscaglia, an author and professor who specialized in what it means to be human, who also said, "A life without love, no matter how many things we have, is an empty, meaningless one." When these quotes are taken together, Buscaglia says that a well-lived life must include both passion and love. By stating what something is not, he is clarifying more about what something is. There are many examples throughout novels and movies where writers describe characters and scenes by describing what they are not. This not only helps us better understand what something is by isolating what it is not, but it also clarifies misunderstandings an audience may hold about that person or location. Throughout a story, you might begin to misunderstand the nature of a person because, through other situations in the narrative, you have conjured up a false representation of the main character. To codify and clarify the main character, the author explicitly states who the main character is not, thus better defining the person they are describing. Perhaps the most famous example of this is found in the Caledonian Creed of 451. This creed came a century after the Nicene Creed and sought to clarify Christ's natures by explicitly stating what he was and what he was not. Even after the Council of Nicea, there were several heretical views about Jesus' humanity and divinity, that he was both fully God and fully man. Because of the divine mystery of this idea, it is easier to say who he isn't than to say who he is. Part of the Caledonian Creed states, "Recognized in two natures, without confusion, without change, without division, and without separation." To put it simply, Jesus is both God and man. He is not a mixture, nor does he change, divide, or separate. Jesus was fully God and fully man and one, not a new thing or third thing after combining two things. 2. Not split in a percentage of a man and a percentage of God that when put together equal 100%. 3. Not changed from God to human, but instead carried both natures. And finally, 4. That this union cannot be separated and will be together into eternity. By stating who Jesus is not, the Creed helped clarify who Jesus is, and oppose heretical views during the 5th century. Last week, we looked at the Trinity and understood that there is unity in God's essence and distinction in his persons. That means that there is one God in three equal and distinct persons: Father, Son, and Spirit. Jesus is God in his essence, the Son in his person, and fully God and fully man in his natures. The Son has been part of the Godhead since eternity past. He was not always God and man, but at the beginning, only God. Jesus added to his nature at the incarnation and became fully God and fully man, a doctrine known as the hypostatic union. He did not lose his deity, but rather added to his nature by becoming fully man while remaining fully God. His two natures were in union with his person. The first chapter of John's Gospel helps us understand that in the beginning was the Word, that is Jesus, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and also that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. John 1:1 and 14. Through the incarnation, Jesus added the nature of humanity to his nature of eternal divinity, thus having two distinct natures in the one person of Jesus. Augustine wrote, "Man was added to him, God not lost to him. He emptied himself not by losing what he was, but by taking to him what he was not." He did not lose his divinity or become a lesser God to become more human. He was 100% God and 100% man. That is the divine mystery that our infinite and wise God has done, and we, as finite and limited beings, cannot comprehend. Throughout his earthly ministry, his humanity and divinity were both present. While being tempted, he also healed the sick. While experiencing pain, he also calmed storms. In his divinity, he had power and authority over sin and death. In his humanity, he experienced emotions, pain, suffering, and temptation. Jesus had to become fully man to live a perfect life of obedience and sinlessness that we could not, and to die a death that we deserve so that we could receive his righteousness by faith. No human in history was without sin and obedient to the law, and yet Jesus was that man. He had to become a man to be an adequate Savior. Hebrews 2:17. Jesus was fully man in all aspects. He was born of a woman, was a baby, grew up in age and knowledge, and experienced the temptations and woes of this world. He became everything that we are and experienced everything that we do. He was tempted in all the ways that we are. He experienced all of the motions and struggles that we do. He understands our struggles and hardships because he has experienced all we have. He was tired, thirsty, hungry, and weary. Hebrews 4:15-16 says, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weakness, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need." Jesus understands our suffering because he has experienced it, and yet wants us to find grace and mercy that only he can provide. Jesus tells us to come to him for rest when we are heavy laden. Matthew 11:28. In his humanity, Jesus understands our struggles and hardships because of his humanity. And in his divinity, he alone can provide rest and comfort for our weary souls.